Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Krista Taves, and I offer a warm welcome to all of you who have gathered today to honor the life of Ronald Michael Kirkpatrick. We are so glad you are here, those of you joining us here in person in our sanctuary, and those of you joining us online. On behalf of the family, thank you. Thank you for coming. We come from many walks of Ron's life: his immediate and extended family, his neighbors and friends, those who knew him as Dr. Kirkpatrick, the veterinarian, and his church family here at Eliot Chapel. We are here to celebrate his life and to offer comfort and support to all who are mourning his passing. In Unitarian Universalism, we do not focus so much on a life hereafter. We leave our beliefs about what happens after death to each of our personal consciousness. But it was this freedom, combined with a deep spiritual sense of our radical interconnectedness, that brought Ron and Yvonne to us. And we have indeed been blessed by their presence with us here. What we do believe in is a loving universal force that asks us to take care of this world and each other. For it is here that we create our heavens and our hells. So we focus on this life, this one precious life, and ask that we make a lifelong commitment to leave this world better than when we arrived in it. So let us be present in this time as we journey through Ron's precious life, for in every life rests the seeds of truth and wisdom, that deeper calling to love one another and to be gracious with ourselves and each other. This is how the Spirit of life, that some call God, moves in and among us and through all that is. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, we light a chalice to symbolize that we are entering sacred space. Our chalice lighting is by Lori Laban. Birth is a miracle of love and courage, bringing light into the world. Death is a loss of light, but no less an act of courage, for we are born from and return to mystery. We dedicate the light of this chalice to the life of Ron Kirkpatrick. At this time, I would invite Lynn Murphy to come forward for a reading.
Thank you. Ron was part of our Earth-Based Spirituality Covenant group for years. He and Yvonne and Izzy the dog, all three have been very close. So I dedicated our session to Ron and his memory in the closing. As we close our session, let us remember the support we give to each other and end our session with this reading that we dedicated to Ron. It's called "We Give Thanks to the Animals," for the animals. We give thanks for the animals who live close to nature, who remind us of the sanctities of birth and death, who do not trouble their lives with foreboding or grief, who let each moment as it passes and let go of it and accept each new one as it comes with serenity and grace. Enable us to walk in beauty as they do, at one with the turning seasons, welcoming the sunrise and sunsets and peace with the sunset. And as we hallow the memory of good friends now departed, who loved abundantly and in their lives were loved, who freely give us their affection and loyalty, let us not be anxious for tomorrow, but only ask that kindness and gratitude fill our hearts day by day into the passing years. That's by Gary Kowalski. Thank you.
Let us open our hearts and minds to Ron's life story, which, not surprisingly, is filled not just with humans, but also with many animals, given his life as a veterinarian and his love of his pets, and many of yours. Ron was born on January 3rd, 1947, the second son of Charlton, who was born and raised in St. Louis, and his mother, Geneva, from Kentucky. Sadly, Ron's life began with a tragedy. His mother died of eclampsia a few days after his birth. Charlton took Ron and Ed, the older brother, and moved in with his mother. And despite this rocky beginning, Ron had a happy childhood. His grandmother ran a boarding house near Wash U, and the house was always filled with professors and scholars and researchers, and luckily, Ron loved meeting new people. He also loved being outside and riding his bike. His brother Ed, who was 7 years older than Ron, served in the military when Ron was a teenager, and Charlton had a map of the world on the wall with a small model plane hanging from the ceiling. Charlton and Ron would mark all of Ed's locations, and this helped Ron feel connected to his brother. Charlton worked for the St. Louis Public Transit. He started at the bottom and worked his way up into upper management. And because of his work, he knew a lot of people. And one was Alfred Muller, a German veterinarian who served in World War II as a military vet taking care of the horses. Charlton and Alfred became close friends, and Ron grew up hearing Alfred's stories of the war. He said he never lost a horse. It was already clear that Ron loved animals and saw Alfred as a role model. So Alfred hired Ron to take care of the animals in his clinic. And when he graduated high school, Ron studied veterinary medicine at Mizzou. Ron and his high school sweetheart, Carol, loved Mizzou. And after graduating, they returned to St. Louis and were married on August 30th, 1969. He worked first with Alfred Muller, and then in the early 1980s, he purchased his own practice in Chesterfield. Ron and Carol were blessed with the birth of their daughter, Michelle, in 1974, and Ron delighted in being her father. He wanted to be the kind of father who broadened his daughter's horizons. He often told her that, and he planned many, many special times for them. Michelle says that she grew up surrounded with his joy. He lived every moment as fully as he could, and he especially loved the holidays and would make them super special for her. They even had a secret handshake, which they did at her wedding after he walked her down the aisle to Steve. Michelle experienced her dad as a quiet strength who never let her down. He worked 6 days a week, but he always made time for her, never missing a game or the important moments in her life. And this continued as Michelle moved into adulthood. During her pregnancy with granddaughter Natalie, Michelle dealt with preeclampsia, just like Ron's mother. And Ron never told Michelle how worried he was. But when she was hospitalized before going on bed rest, he was right beside her, making sure that Natalie and Michelle were healthy and stable. When Natalie was born with jaundice and had to be readmitted into the hospital at only 3 days old, her grandparents stayed overnight singing to her, while Steve and Michelle went home to get some rest. In 1993, Carol was diagnosed with cancer. It was traveling aggressively, but she was determined to beat it. And this is when Yvonne came into the picture. You see, Carol worked the front desk of the clinic, and Yvonne brought her pets to Ron. So Carol, Ron, and Yvonne became friends, and Yvonne was present for some of Carol's journey with cancer. When Yvonne moved to South City, they lost contact, and Carol passed away in 1996. This was a very, very difficult time for Ron and Michelle. but they really took care of each other as they grieved Carol. But one day, out of the blue, Ron called Yvonne, ostensibly to ask about her cat. And Yvonne asked about Carol and learned that she had passed away. And then Ron asked Yvonne for a favor. Would she meet him for coffee and teach him how to be happy as a single person? And that is how they started hanging out. First as friends, and then slowly they developed deeper feelings for each other. Ron and Yvonne shared the same passions: books, nature, gardening, animals, arts, culture. The friendship became more than a friendship. And that is when Molly, Yvonne's dog, came into the picture, because she came with the deal. And she was there. On their first date, the three of them went hiking at Powder Valley Park. I think Ron passed the test. On June 11th, 1999, Ron and Yvonne were married. And then Ron, Yvonne, and Molly headed out to Lake Tahoe for their honeymoon, which became the first test of their marriage. Ron convinced them to go canoeing, and off they went. But the boat tipped into the cold glacial waters, and there were doubts at one point that they would actually make it. But with some help, they got to safety. And later that evening, as they warmed up in their cabin, Ron looked at her and said, "Are you thinking of divorce or homicide?" Ron and Yvonne had a wonderful marriage. Of course, there were challenges, as there are in all lifelong relationships, but they deeply loved each other and loved the life that they created. Yvonne was always touched by the way that Ron worked with animals, and here are a few stories about that. One day, a family brought in their dog, Winston, who was old and sick. The family said it was the dog's time. And Ron asked to be alone with the dog. And he asked him, "Winston, is this the day?" And Winston walked out the door. So Ron went to the family and told them he wasn't ready and to take him home. A month later, they brought Winston back, saying that he was suffering too much. And once again, Ron asked to be alone with Winston and asked, "Winston, is this the day?" Winston stayed in the room. It was time. Another story. One morning, as Ron was beginning his day at the animal clinic, he received a call that a dog had impaled itself on an iron fence off Highway 40. So Ron gathered the materials he needed, and with a vet tech, he drove to the area, and there was the dog. Ron called the fire department, and while they were on their way, Ron gave the dog a sedative and began examining the situation. When the firefighters arrived, they cut the fence and used it as a stretcher and took the dog to Ron's clinic. Luckily, no organs were involved, so Ron closed the wound, and the lucky dog spent the rest of the week at the clinic. And then he was adopted by a client and became Ron's patient for a long, healthy life. And Yvonne shares another story that didn't involve dogs and cats, although they are present. One day, a young man arrived at the clinic. Jim, call him Jim, had graduated from high school, married his high school sweetheart, and now he needed a job. Ron looked at the teenager in front of him in scruffy blue jeans and straggly hair and knew that it would be hard for him to get a job. But Ron saw a young man in need. So Ron became his mentor. And Jim offered to clean the kennels, walk the dogs, take out the trash, clean the clinic. And Ron saw that Jim was a hard worker and responsible and thorough. So he gave him more responsibilities, teaching him as he went. Ron taught him how to gently restrain a pet for an examination how to draw blood, how to prepare the sample for the lab. There was nothing Ron taught him that Jim didn't excel in. So Ron suggested that Jim prepare to take the tests to become a veterinary technician. And he passed with flying colors, and now he was working at the clinic as a fully accredited vet tech. Well, Jim moved to Florida, and they lost contact. And several years later, Jim visited the clinic and left Ron his card. And on the card, it showed that Jim had earned his PhD in astrophysics and was now employed at NASA. So clearly, Jim had the ability to see the potential in others, and he became a mentor to many. Some became veterinarians, some became specialists, and one became a rocket scientist. Ron became very close with Yvonne's family and spent a lot of time with her parents as they aged. In fact, as each of them moved into long-term care, Ron visited them regularly, sometimes daily. He fed Yvonne's dad and gave him a shave. He shared meals and visited with Yvonne's mother, and he was a source of support and love in their final years. His sister-in-law, Yolanda, writes these words. Mother Teresa once said, "Kind words can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are truly endless." The kind words and actions that Ron was known for truly will make his legacy endless. Ron's family, friends, and veterinary clients could count on the support and knowledge that he was always willing to share. As his sister-in-law, he was there for me when I needed help with my dogs and cats. He had such empathy and knowledge that he always comforted me, even through difficult times. It was apparent that Ron had a passion for helping animals, and he would light up when he shared stories about the variety of animals he cared for. Among these was a bond he shared with an elephant at Grant's farm. When Ron called to the elephant, it would come to him and extend its legs so that Ron could hop on his back and take a ride. It was apparent that they had a special connection. When my parents needed help, he visited them almost daily and either had a meal with them or provided the care they needed. Yolanda continues. When the COVID pandemic hit, Ron and Yvonne would visit almost every week, and we had a great time watching movies, eating lunches from our favorite restaurants, and walking the trails. Ron always expressed such sincere joy and appreciation. He was frequently the first to compliment anyone when he could see that they had worked so hard on a project, or he just enjoyed what they were doing. His positive attitude towards life, even when he was physically struggling, was truly a model for how one should live. In 2017, Ron experienced himself becoming unsteady, sometimes losing his balance. After a long series of tests, he was diagnosed with leukoencephalopathy, a newly discovered disease that cannot be cured. But with physical therapy, which he did religiously, he was able to keep the disease at bay for quite some time. But over the last 2 to 3 years, the illness progressed, and he became weaker. This was a precious time for Ron, Michelle, Yvonne, Yolanda, Ed, Izzy, their dog, and all who loved them. They treasured every moment. What can we take from Ron's rich life? Fill every moment with beauty, joy, and love. Learn to listen deeply to all things. Welcome new relationships, new ideas, new ways of living. Love the earth. Always put the ones you love first. You'll never be sorry. On August 13th, 2024, surrounded by Michelle, Yvonne and Izzy, Ron slipped over to the other side, but he remains with those he loved in so many ways. To those who grieve his passing, let us be thankful for the many blessings bestowed upon us and upon this earth by this very gentle, kind, determined, and strong man. Amen and blessed be. Please join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation as you are willing and able. Spirit of life, God of grace and mercy, source of that unending love that changes us as we cannot change ourselves. We are spirit creatures trying to be human, and we are thankful for Ron's life. We are glad to have known him, to have loved him, and to have been loved by him in return. His gentleness, kindness, wisdom, and strength have blessed us all and will continue to bless us and our larger world. May we who mourn his death be granted the gifts of understanding and peace. For those things left unfinished and unsaid, may we find acceptance and forgiveness. May we offer our love and care to those who feel his absence most keenly. May you know that you are not alone. You are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses and by the love of too many to name. Let us enter into a moment of silence in honor of Ron Kirkpatrick. Spirit of life, as we bid Ron farewell, let us be confident and trusting that a human life is full of meaning and purpose, even in death. For human life is a sacred thing. Its beginning is sacred. Its span of years is sacred, and its ending is sacred too. Let Ron's name be inscribed on the tree of life forever. Amen, and blessed be. And now let us extinguish the chalice. As we extinguish this chalice, may the light that once was Ron Kirkpatrick, living and breathing among us, now rest in our hearts. For all who see God, may God go with you. For all who embrace life, may life return your affection. For all who seek a right path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step. Amen. Thank you all for coming today. The family invites you to a reception in Adams Hall, which is through these doors and to your left. Go in peace.